youth, and until today it's one of the books I really like most of what I've written. My research interests are connected to my former interest in historical questions. So I started with this Jewish stone vessels, which was my first book. Then I developed it into a full-scale study of the Pharisees. That means the major and most important Jewish group in the time of Jesus, and at the same time the fiercest opponents of Jesus and of earliest Christianity. And since then I'm interested in this also a kind of hostile or not too friendly relation between Christianity and Judaism, and I've done some studies, or in the moment I'm working on a project dealing with polemical texts from the Jewish and the Christian sides on the basis of the New or the Old Testament. That means both traditions argue against each other on the basis of their Holy Scripture, trying to convince the other side that they read the biblical texts in the wrong way. Another big question I'm interested in, although it's in a way harder to say I'm really researching it, because it's a kind of question which sticks in your mind and you want to deal with it, but it's hard to do it in a precise way, is the interface between faith and history. That means that the question in which way God is involved in the reality of this world, and is there any chance to see or to describe this in a methodological way, the reality of this world and the belief of, I would say, the majority of the people, that God is an active player and participant in our personal history as well as in the history of this world. And I've written recently 2 longer papers discussing this question and trying to argue that it's in a way necessary, at least from a theological viewpoint, to argue that you can't describe reality and how things develop without allowing God to be a cause in how things develop and how things happened. And of course, history normally wants to stick on what you can prove with scientific tools. And let's say the influence of prayer on a personal life or on the developments of history is something which is very hard to prove. But I would say, even if you can't prove it, you have to, in a way, you have to integrate it in your thinking about events, at least for those people who think that God is reality, is a kind of ontological truth claim, and not just extrapolation of our human wishes and hopes. I'm also engaged in a research project which is done together by scholars from Germany, from Britain and the United States, with the idea to write a new kind of commentary for the New Testament, which tries to demonstrate the deep enrootedness of the New Testament writings within its Jewish context and matrix. That means to demonstrate that the New Testament is not just part of the Christian Bible, it's not just part of a faith tradition, but it's also part of the literary and social and religious context of first century Judaism, and important historical source for this kind of question, without having all these religious elements added to it. And for this we try to show how the way of thinking, the way of describing things is connected and based more or less on Jewish texts and contexts. And to see how much the Christian tradition owes the Jewish tradition helps us to understand, then also to see the differences and to understand why it is possible that Christianity develops as a different religious identity next to Judaism, and how these two important religions are able to develop from the same common ground or common soil. And my study with connected with the polemical texts from Christians against Jews or from Jews against Christians from the 2nd to the 18th century is in a way a continuation of this project, to see how these faith traditions then argue on the basis of their text, their common texts, why the other is wrong or why the own tradition is right. And to understand this means in a way to understand really the core of the conflicts and the differences of religious people up to the modern day. I'm also engaged in a teaching project at the Ben Gurion University in Beersheba in Israel. And this is building up a teaching program for New Testament and early Christian studies, and early Jewish studies, sorry. And within early Jewish studies to make clear that the New Testament is not just the source and the text for the Christian tradition, but it's also an important collection of writings written mainly by Jews in the 1st century, dealing with a major Jewish topic, namely the idea of a messianic belief and the idea of a Messiah who was sent by God for the redemption of the world. And to deal with this topic within a Jewish context, mainly with Jewish students, and so in a very practical sense, cherish and enjoy the differences and our different approaches. So together with my colleague in Beersheba, we sometimes teach together modules where we approach these questions of what do we think about sin, or what do we think about redemption, about Messiah and the task of a Messiah from a Jewish perspective and from a Christian perspective, and then make clear how we approach in a way the same text but from a different angle and with differing results, but nevertheless we do this in a kind of friendly approach, trying to help the other side to understand why what we are doing is in a way rational and from our understanding in the trajectory of this common biblical tradition. And at the same time we understand why the other side has problems with our way of reading these texts and embodying these texts. And I think this is exactly the way how understanding is able to get developed within a multi-religious society without the need to say, oh, in the end we should come to one universal religion, but that we allow ourselves to be different and in a way faithful to our own traditions, but without hurting or denigrating the other position. With respect to funding, humanities are in a way in a better situation on the one hand than sciences on the other hand are in a weaker position, in a better way because humanities are cheaper. What we need is mainly time for reading, for intense reading, for writing and a kind of intense research. And so if we need additional funding, we need it mainly to buy us time. That means financing sabbatical leaves, replacement teaching, research assistants or teaching assistants which help us with a daily routine at the university. And the other major element for funding is to increase manpower. That means allowing us to hire postgraduate students or to start a research project where we have young scholars working with us on a common projects. So these are the two major fields where humanities need some money, but as a whole it's much cheaper than the sciences because we don't need huge laboratories or technical apparatuses. We only need, as I mentioned, time and manpower. And in my work, the teaching program in Berkshire